They laughed before they even saw her. Not a laugh of joy, but a sharp, hungry kind of laugh. The kind that cuts before it touches. The kind of laugh that says, "You don't belong here." Under the golden chandeliers of the Crystal Mirage Hotel, something cruel was about to unfold, and at the center of it all stood a woman no one expected. Her name was Elise Monroe. Years ago, Elise and Camilla Hawthorne had been inseparable. Two teenage girls wandering the cracked sidewalks of Easton Hill, their laughter rising like birds over iron fences. They shared secrets over peanut butter sandwiches, swapped dreams beneath graffiti-covered bus stops, and promised to never forget each other, no matter what. But the city forgot them both. Camilla vanished into fame, Elise into silence. And the next time their names would appear in the same room would be on a wedding invitation. Elise lived now in the quieter side of Marigold City. She worked from her oak-paneled study in a house perched on the edge of the coast, calm waves always nearby, her world filled with books, files, and the steady hum of purpose. She didn't crave attention, she didn't need it, but then it came. A cream-colored envelope, thick and scented faintly of jasmine. Gilded lettering shimmered on the surface. Elise Monroe. Inside, the handwriting looped in practiced strokes. "Dearest Elise, I would be honored if you joined me on the most important day of my life. Please say you'll come. With all my love, Camilla Hawthorne." Elise stared at it for minutes. 15 years had passed since they'd last spoken. Why now? She considered not going. But something stirred inside her, a quiet hope. Maybe this was a bridge. Maybe people really did grow and soften. Elise wasn't naive, but she wasn't bitter either. "Let's see," she whispered to herself. Far across the city, Camilla sat in a high-rise overlooking Manhattan. She was wrapped in silk, hair in curls, fingers painted in coral gloss. Around her sat her loyal inner circle, Brianna, Kendall, and Tori. All three lounged on velvet furniture, clutching wine glasses like golden trophies. Camilla tapped on her guest list and let out a soft laugh. "Elise Monroe," she said slowly, drawing out the syllables like a dare. Tori raised an eyebrow. "The nerd? From Easton Hill?" Kendall let out a cruel little snort. "Didn't she always wear knockoff shoes from thrift bins?" Brianna didn't laugh. She just smirked. "You invited her?" Camilla's eyes gleamed. "Yes. I want her there. Right in the front row." A pause. Then all four clinked their glasses together with quiet, wicked glee. "She'll never forget it," Camilla whispered. Elise had no idea what was waiting. When the day finally arrived, the sky over Miami was a soft watercolor blend of gold and pink. Elise stepped out of her private car at the entrance of the Mirage. Her dress, a soft lavender chiffon, moved gently in the sea breeze. She wore no diamonds, just a delicate silver locket and a pair of handmade sandals. The valet looked puzzled. The doorman gave her a second glance. And yet, Elise walked forward calmly. There was no need to prove anything. Inside, the air was thick with perfume and power. Laughter bounced off crystal columns. Celebrities in silk gowns stood beside billionaires in tailored tuxedos. Waiters carried trays of champagne, and rose petals lined every edge of the hall. Then the whispers started. "Who's that? Did she walk in from a different event? She looks like a kindergarten teacher at a royal ball." "She actually came," one guest muttered behind a manicured hand, voice thick with disbelief and venom. "Still dressing like it's a school picnic," another woman snickered, her satin-clad shoulder brushing against her dates. "Is that linen?" scoffed someone draped in velvet. "At Camilla Hawthorne's wedding? What a joke!" Elise walked slowly, deliberately, offering a warm nod to the servers lining the golden aisle. But their eyes weren't on her in kindness. They mirrored the guests. Puzzlement, mockery, suspicion, all wrapped up in uncomfortable silence. Camilla's voice cut through the buzz like sugar-hiding shards of glass. "Oh, Elise," she drawled, descending the marble staircase like a swan dipped in ice. Her gown shimmered like crushed moonlight, and her mouth curled with a practiced smile that stopped just short of sincerity. "You haven't changed a bit. So delightfully plain." Elise blinked but kept her smile steady. She extended her hand with quiet grace. "Congratulations, Camilla. I'm happy for you." Camilla's eyes flicked to the trio standing behind her. Tori with her smug arch of the brow, Kendall stifling laughter into her champagne, and Brianna, ever the shadow, flashing a wolfish grin behind her glittering glass. Camilla leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tonight's your night to shine, Elise. Trust me, no one will forget you." Then she turned, her diamond-studded veil sweeping against Elise's shoulder like a cold warning. The clique followed her, all silk and malice, disappearing into a ripple of gossip and perfume. Elise stood alone. Around her, clusters formed like storm clouds, whispering about the woman who didn't belong. Her dress, her skin, her presence. Still, she straightened her back. She'd walked harder roads before. She would walk this one, too, with dignity. From a high platform across the room, Camilla watched through narrowed eyes, her smile untouched by warmth. Elise was exactly where she wanted her, surrounded, silent, and unaware. The game had begun. Elise moved through the opulent crowd like a thread of simplicity woven through gold. Every step felt heavier as curious glances turned into judgmental stares. She reached the guest registry desk, where a young blonde woman, hair wound into a perfect bun, stood tapping on a sleek tablet. Her name tag read Zoe, and her eyes barely flicked upward as Elise approached. But when they did, they scanned Elise with practiced disdain. Before Elise could even speak, Zoe interjected with forced politeness. "Excuse me, ma'am. Staff changes are handled through the East Corridor. You'll find uniforms and supplies down that hall." A beat of silence. Elise's breath caught in her throat like a stone. She wasn't new to mistaken assumptions, but this one landed sharper. Public, personal, meant to diminish. She lifted her chin, calm and clear. "Actually, I'm a guest." She produced the invitation, white as cream, gold-foiled, weighty, in her hand. "I was invited by name." Zoe hesitated. Her polished fingers trembled slightly as she accepted the card. Her eyes scanned the delicate lettering, Elise Monroe. Her brows knit. She tapped on her tablet, rechecking. "Yes," she finally said, voice lower now, stained with awkward surprise. "You're on the list. My apologies, ma'am. Please, right this way." But it was too late. Heads had already turned. Ears had already caught the exchange. Whispers stirred the air. "She thought she was staff." "Camilla's pulling something tonight for sure." "Oh, this is going to be good." Elise took her card back, nodded faintly, and stepped through the golden doors. The weight of 100 stairs pressed on her back like invisible hands. And above it all, Camilla smiled. A cruel, victorious kind of smile that belonged not to a bride, but a hunter. Whispers spread fast, like fire on dry grass. In one corner of the ballroom, a man in a shiny black suit, holding a glass of fancy wine, smiled as he leaned toward his friend. "See her?" he said, pointing toward Elise. "Camilla brought her just for the drama." A famous actress nearby, wearing a sparkly green dress, spoke just loud enough so others could hear. "Why would the bride invite someone like that here?" she said, rolling her eyes. Across the room, Camilla Hawthorne stood watching it all. Her smile was small, but full of pride. She glanced at her close friends, Tori, Kendall, and Brianna, who were all grinning like they had just won a game. Tori leaned in and whispered, "Your plan's working better than we thought." Camilla's eyes sparkled. "Oh, this is just the start," she said. "Tonight, Elise will learn where she truly belongs." Meanwhile, Elise tried to stay calm. She could feel the looks, hear the whispers, and see the fake smiles. But she kept walking, head high, heart steady. She moved toward a long table full of candles and white flowers, hoping to find a quiet corner. But Camilla and her friends weren't done with her yet. Tori started walking toward her. She looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine, tall, beautiful, and glowing in a tight red dress. Her heels clicked with each step as she came closer, a glass of champagne in hand. "Well, look who's here," Tori said sweetly, but her words had a sharp edge. "That outfit, so simple, so humble." Elise smiled politely. "Nice to see you too, Tori. I'm just here to wish Camilla well." Tori let out a laugh. It was loud enough that people nearby turned to look. Soon, Brianna and Kendall joined, her ready to play along. Brianna, the boss of a big beauty company, looked Elise up and down. "Wow, you really wore that here?" she said. "Looks like something from a street market." Kendall, who was a famous TV host, added with a fake, kind voice, "Maybe it's a gift from her grandma, a special hand-me-down." All three of them laughed, loud and cruel. Elise stood still. Her cheeks burned. Her heart pounded. She had prepared herself for this, but it still hurt. She didn't let her pain show. She took a deep breath and held her ground. But the girls still weren't done. Tori raised her phone. She started taking pictures of Elise without asking. "Smile, Elise," she said with fake kindness. "You're going to be famous. My followers love this kind of real beauty." Click, click, click. Nearby, Camilla watched like a queen, enjoying a show. Her eyes were cold, but her smile said she was pleased. She had set a trap, and Elise had walked right in. And the worst part? The night wasn't even over yet. Phones buzzed like bees in a garden of gossip. The moment Tori posted Elise's photo, the internet lit up. Notifications, likes, and comments flooded her screen. Tori's caption was sharp as a blade. "When you crash a luxury wedding looking like a clearance rack tribute." Kendall, the glamorous TV host with millions of fans, followed suit. She snapped her own photo and typed out, "Elise Monroe, the bravest guest of the night, daring enough to wear linen to a crystal palace." Brianna, CEO of one of the country's top beauty brands, added her own post. "High society dreams, thrift store scenes, iconic really." The guests caught on. One by one, they pulled out their phones, whispering and laughing, showing each other the posts. Some tried to be quiet. Others didn't bother. Elise stood in the middle of it all, her heart pounding in her chest. It was like being in the center of a storm. Every laugh, every glance felt like a slap. But she didn't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Across the room, Tori smirked and lifted her glass like she was toasting a victory. "She's really stealing the spotlight," she said loudly. "Should we give her a trophy for best budget outfit at $1 million wedding?" Camille stepped forward then, her voice dripping with fake kindness. She rested her hand lightly on Elise's shoulder, her smile as sweet as sugar but cold as ice. "Oh, Elise," she said smoothly, "don't mind them. My friends can be a little honest. I'm sure they didn't mean anything by it. You're not taking it personally, are you?" Before Elise could reply, Camille turned and walked back to Tori, Kendall, and Brianna. They all exchanged smug looks, clearly pleased with themselves. Elise's cheeks burned. She felt like she was shrinking, disappearing into the polished marble floor. But she stayed standing. Her pride, though bruised, still held her upright. She took a deep breath. Her eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. Not yet. She didn't know that this cruel show was only beginning. Camille and her inner circle weren't just mocking her. They had planned it all. The invitation, the setup, the public humiliation. Elise wasn't just a guest. She was the evening's entertainment. And now the whole room knew it. The air grew heavy with judgment. Every corner of the grand ballroom buzzed with cruel excitement. A woman in a sleek black dress raised her phone and recorded Elise openly. "Can you believe this? A linen dress at Crystal Mirage? What is this? A costume party?" Her words echoed through the room. People laughed. A man in a white tuxedo, someone Elise recognized from the business world, added his own voice. "Maybe Camille hired her to warm up the crowd. Though honestly, this is just sad." Tori, Kendall, and Brianna stood close, sipping champagne, their eyes never leaving Elise. Brianna leaned in toward Camille, her golden hair catching the light. "You're brilliant," she whispered. "One little invitation, and she's the main act." Camille said nothing. Her eyes were locked on Elise, savoring every moment of her discomfort. The plan was working. Then Camille stepped into the center of the room. The string quartet quieted, and all eyes turned to the glowing bride. She raised her glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," Camille began, her voice smooth and polished, "thank you all for being here tonight. I just want to say, it's been so touching to reconnect with some old faces." She paused, her eyes landing on Elise. "I must admit," she continued with a delicate smile, "some guests surprised me. I never imagined someone would attend wearing, well, something so bold. But I suppose it takes courage to be different." Gasps and giggles rippled through the crowd. Elise stood frozen. Every cruel whisper, every mocking look gathered into a wave of shame crashing over her. She wanted to disappear. But instead she straightened her back. Her hands trembled, but she stood tall. They wouldn't break her, not tonight, not ever. The silence didn't last. Camille's smile stayed frozen as she looked directly at Elise, then slowly lowered her glass. The moment felt thick, like time itself was holding its breath. Then, with one perfectly manicured hand, she gave a tiny wave toward the security team standing at the edge of the ballroom. Two tall men in navy blue suits stepped forward. Their expressions were polite but firm. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes, gave Elise an apologetic look. "Miss Monroe," he said softly, "we're going to have to ask you to come with us." The room didn't gasp. It laughed. Someone near the bar actually clapped. Phones rose like flowers. In bloom, everyone trying to catch the drama on video. Elise felt the breath leave her body. Her legs locked in place, and for a moment she thought she might fall. But she didn't. She couldn't. "Is this for real?" Someone whispered behind her. "She's actually getting kicked out?" "Honestly," said another voice, "I thought she was staff when I saw her walk in." More laughter, more cameras, more eyes. One of the guards, his name tag read Daniel, stepped a little closer and lowered his voice even more. "I'm sorry. I really but we've been asked to escort you out. Can you please come with us? Quietly, if possible?" Elise turned to him, her mouth dry. She nodded, though her heart screamed inside her chest. Every second felt like a punch. Every footstep she took was heavy with shame. She started to move, one slow step at a time. Behind her, the sound of Camille's voice rang out again, louder now, mocking yet polished, like a cruel actress playing a gracious host. "For the comfort of all our guests," Camille said with a smile, "we have to maintain a certain standard. I'm sure you all understand." That was the final dagger. The crowd laughed like they were at a show. Some guests shook their heads. A few clinked glasses, toasting the bride's grace under pressure. Tori held her phone high, recording Elise as she walked. Her voice was gleeful and sharp. "Here she goes, ladies and gents. Our unexpected star of the night. Who knew linen could be so controversial? Brianna added her own commentary, biting and smug. I just hope this doesn't scare off the caterers. We still need dessert. Kendall laughed so hard she wiped tears from her eyes. Honestly, it's like a live reality show. This is better than anything I've hosted on TV. As Elise reached the doors, she heard someone call out, Hope she doesn't stain the marble floors on the way out. That one hurt, deeply. The guards kept close, but respectful. Daniel, still by her side, whispered again, You're handling this better than anyone I've ever seen. Elise wanted to thank him, but the words wouldn't come. Her throat was tight, her vision blurred. Still, no tears fell. Not here, not in front of them. Outside the ballroom, the world was quieter, the air cooler. Elise stood in the grand hallway of the crystal mirage, just beyond. The golden doors that had now shut behind her like a vault. Her heart ached in a way that words couldn't describe. Not just from the insults, not just from the embarrassment, but from betrayal. Camille. They'd shared childhood secrets, laughed over cafeteria lunches, cheered each other on at school talent shows, and now, this. Elise walked a little farther, her shoes clicking softly on the polished floors. Her reflection looked back at her from the wall-length mirrors, eyes wide, dress simple, spirit shaken. She paused near a fountain, its soft water bubbling gently in the silence. What had she done to deserve this? Was it the way she dressed? The life she chose, simple, quiet, far from the glittering world of Camille's fame? No. She knew the truth. This wasn't about clothes, or fashion, or being different. It was about power. It was about someone who had more, needing to make someone who had less feel small. Elise looked down at the invitation still clutched in her hand. Thick ivory paper, gold foil letters. Her name written in cursive. The same paper that had promised inclusion now felt like a lie. Inside the ballroom, the music resumed. The laughter returned. The show continued. But Elise stood taller now. The hurt was still there. The shame hadn't faded. But something new had bloomed quietly inside her chest. Not rage, not vengeance, but resolve. They had tried to humiliate her. They had tried to break her. But she was still here. Just when Elise thought it couldn't get worse, Kendall, the famous celebrity host and one of Camille's closest allies, saw an opening too good to pass up. With a sharp glint in her eyes and a smile that looked sweet on the outside but felt like ice, Kendall picked up a tall glass of red wine from the nearest table. She walked over to Elise with slow, careful steps, like a cat closing in on its prey. "Oh, Elise, darling," Kendall purred, her voice full of fake sympathy. "You look so tense. Let me help you relax a little." Before Elise could answer, or move away, Kendall let the glass tip forward, not by accident, but with cruel precision. The dark wine spilled down Elise's chest and across her simple linen dress, soaking the soft blue fabric in a deep, ugly red. It looked like a wound blooming across her body. A hush fell across the room. And then came the laughter. Loud, sharp, brutal. "Oh, no!" Kendall gasped with mock horror, covering her mouth as if shocked. But her eyes told the truth. She was thrilled. "Oh, Elise, I'm so sorry. But you know what? That splash of red might actually help your look. Very artistic." Around them, the guests roared with laughter. Phones were up again, flashes popping, fingers typing captions. Another moment of public humiliation, served up like dessert. Tori clutched her stomach, giggling uncontrollably. Brianna wiped tears from her eyes. Camille simply stood back, arms folded, her lips curled in pure satisfaction. Elise stood frozen. Her hands trembled at her sides. Her dress was ruined. Her heart felt shattered. But she didn't let them see her cry. Daniel, standing nearby, with Nathan, looked deeply uncomfortable. His face tightened as he stepped forward and quietly handed Elise a tissue, his voice low and full of regret. "I'm really sorry, ma'am," he said gently. "No one deserves this." Elise gave him a faint nod, her throat too tight for words. She dabbed the fabric with the tissue, knowing it wouldn't make a difference. The stain wouldn't come out. Not the one on her dress, and not the one on her heart. She inhaled slowly, willing herself to stay upright, to not fall apart. Her dignity was hanging by a thread, but it was still there. Across the room, Camille turned to her circle and whispered loud enough for them all to hear. "Well done, Kendall. That was perfect. She'll never forget this moment." Kendall sipped from another glass, her eyes glittering. A night to remember. They all thought Elise was broken, that she would disappear forever after tonight. But none of them realized what they had truly done. That this pain they caused wasn't the end of Elise. It was the spark. As Elise took one last step toward the door, thinking she might finally escape this nightmare, Camille's voice rang out once again from the stage. "Hold on a moment, everyone," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. The room fell silent again. Camille stood at the center of the spotlight, looking calm and gracious on the outside. But her words were poison-wrapped, in pearls. "I've just been told something troubling," she said, pausing for dramatic effect. "It seems that our guest, Ms. Elise Monroe, may have brought something dangerous into the venue tonight." Gasps spread through the crowd. "What?" someone whispered. "Did she just say dangerous?" Elise's blood turned cold. Camille's face showed concern, but her tone was full of lies. "For the safety of our guests, I need security to inspect the gift Elise brought. We can't be too careful, can we?" Murmurs turned into panic. Guests stepped away from Elise like she was a threat. Phones lifted again. Cameras rolled. Faces stared. Elise's hands went numb. "Dangerous?" she whispered, stunned. "What are you talking about?" Daniel and Nathan stood at her side again. They both looked trapped. "I'm really sorry," Nathan said, almost in a whisper. "We have to check the package." Tears burned in Elise's eyes. She had wrapped that gift herself, a handmade personal present she had crafted with love and care. It was nothing but kindness in a box. Now it was being treated like a weapon. With shaking hands, Elise held it out. Daniel took it gently, trying not to make it worse. He slowly untied the twine, peeled away the brown craft paper. Inside was a wooden photo frame, carved by hand, holding a picture of Elise and Camille from their high school graduation. Two smiling girls, arms around each other, hopeful about the future. There was also a note. "To Camille, on your new chapter. I may not be part of your world anymore, but I'll never forget where we came from. With love, Elise." The moment froze. A few guests near the front saw the contents. The air shifted slightly. Someone whispered, "It's just a photo. A memory." Daniel looked up, face pale. He handed the frame back to Elise with trembling hands. "I'm so sorry," he said again. But the damage was done. The room was still buzzing, phones still recording. The words "dangerous item" had already left Camille's lips, and no truth would ever erase the sting of that lie. Camille stepped down from the stage with perfect posture, her veil fluttering behind her like a queen returning to her throne. She looked at Elise, then at the crowd. "Well," she said with a soft smile, "I guess it was just a misunderstanding." She laughed gently, and the room followed. Tears welled in Elise's eyes and finally broke free, sliding down her cheeks like trails of defeat. She didn't sob, she didn't scream, but the pain ran deep. Camille watched from the stage, her lips curled in triumph. She'd done it. She had crushed Elise in front of everyone, and she wasn't finished. "Daniel, Nathan," she called calmly, "please escort Miss Monroe out. We wouldn't want this special night ruined any further." Elise took a small step toward the doors. Her feet felt like stone. Her body trembled. The jeers behind her continued, but she barely heard them now. Each step she took was heavy with pain, shame, and heartbreak. She was almost at the door when something changed. A deep, rumbling sound rolled in from outside, low and powerful like thunder arriving on wheels. Conversation stopped. Laughter froze. Everyone turned. Outside the glass doors of the Crystal Mirage, a convoy of sleek black Rolls-Royces had pulled into the courtyard. Their headlights lit up the marble entrance like a stage. Guests gasped and whispered. "Who is that?" someone asked. "Another VIP?" The doors opened slowly. Out stepped a tall man in a black suit, tailored so perfectly it seemed stitched by time itself. It was Adrian Blake, the billionaire, the private, elusive mogul known across the world. He was rarely seen, never expected. And yet, here he was. A hush fell over the room like fog. Those who had laughed the loudest now stepped back, parting like waves. Their eyes widened with shock and unease. Camille's face drained of color. Adrian walked calmly into the ballroom, every step controlled, powerful, silent. He didn't glance at anyone. His eyes were only on Elise, the woman standing with her stained blanket clutched to her chest. He stopped just a few feet from her, his stern face softened. His eyes, usually guarded, now glowed with warmth. "Elise," he said, his voice deep and clear, cutting through the silence like music. "I'm sorry I'm late." Elise looked up. Tears sparkled in her eyes, not just from sadness, but from a deep, stunned recognition. The moment had changed. The room had shifted. Everything was about to turn. The man Elise had kept hidden from this glittering world, not out of shame, but to protect the quiet, genuine love they shared, now stood beside her, shielding her from the storm of cruelty with nothing more than his presence. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Adrian, I'm okay." Adrian took her hand in his grip steady, warm, and unshakable. It was a touch that said everything. "I'm here. I've got you." Then he turned to the silent, stunned crowd. His voice, calm but commanding, echoed through the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, eyes sweeping the faces of those who had moments earlier laughed at Elise like she was a joke. "I apologize for the interruption, but there's something all of you need to know." The entire room leaned in. "The woman you ridiculed tonight? The one you mocked for dressing simply? For bringing a gift made with her own hands? She is my wife, Elise Monroe Blake." Gasps rang out. Audible. Sharp. Like the collective air had been sucked out of the room. Elise stood frozen. The same people who had whispered insults behind fans and flutes of champagne were now staring at her with wide eyes and pale faces. Their amusement turned to discomfort. Their arrogance melted into quiet panic. Adrian's voice grew firmer. "You all pride yourselves on wealth, on taste, on knowing who belongs in a room like this. But tonight you revealed who you truly are. Not one of you asked about Elise. Not one showed her kindness or grace. Instead, you decided she wasn't worthy because she didn't fit your image." He turned toward the stage where Camille stood like a statue, her face stiff and drained of color. "Elise may dress plainly, but she carries more strength, grace, and dignity than this entire room combined. And she is not just my wife. She is the co-owner of Blake Enterprises. She owns half our company. Her decisions shape billion-dollar deals. Her mind drives innovation. Her name holds more power than any of you imagined." A wave of horrified whispers surged across the room. Tori, Kendall, Brianna, they looked as if their designer heels might collapse beneath them. Eyes darted nervously. Guests pulled phones from their clutches and pockets, some already deleting photos, others pretending they hadn't laughed just minutes ago. Elise squeezed Adrian's hand, still trembling. But now, not from fear. His words wrapped around her like armor, slowly healing every cut left by their cruelty. Daniel and Nathan, the security guards who had been ordered to escort her out, stood awkwardly in the background. Shame was written all over their faces. Daniel, heart heavy, bowed, his head slightly. Adrian wasn't done. I came here tonight because Elise believed this wedding invitation was sincere. She wanted to show support to someone from her past. But what she received in return was a parade of insults, cruelty, and humiliation. His eyes cut to Camille, who still hadn't spoken. She gripped the podium like it might save her from drowning. Adrian looked around the room slowly, his voice calm but firm. Maybe it's time everyone here learned the truth. The silence in the ballroom deepened. No one dared to look away as Adrian's eyes moved across the crowd. His next words struck like thunder. The woman you all mocked tonight, my wife, Elise Monroe, is not just my partner in life. She is the co-owner of Blake Enterprises. She owns half the company, shares worth billions, and she personally oversees many of our most important operations. Gasps echoed through the room like cracks of lightning. People began to whisper. Powerful CEOs, socialites, and influencers, who had sneered at Elise now stood frozen, their confidence draining from their faces. A woman in diamonds clutched her drink, hands trembling. One executive turned pale, staring down at the floor to avoid Adrian's sharp gaze. Camille, still standing on the stage, went stiff. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. It was as if the floor had dropped from beneath her. Adrian didn't stop. Elise lives simply. She doesn't show off, but that doesn't mean she deserves to be ridiculed. I've never been more ashamed to stand in a room full of people who claim to be high society. His eyes landed on Tori, Kendall, and Brianna, the ones who had laughed the loudest. They looked down, their faces red with guilt. The same hands that had clapped for Elise's humiliation now clung to their glasses and phones, unsure what to do. Adrian's voice grew stronger. Elise not only runs part of one of the largest companies in the country, she also donates quietly to over 50 charities. She builds schools. She funds shelters. She doesn't need applause for her kindness. She just wants to help. That truth cut deeper than any insult they had thrown at her. Even Daniel and Nathan, the security guards, looked shaken. Daniel bowed his head slightly, clearly ashamed to have played a role in removing Elise earlier. Adrian looked at Elise, his voice softening. And now you all know who you tried to humiliate. The woman I love, respect, and trust more than anyone. Then his eyes turned to Camille, sharp as glass. Camille Hawthorne, what you did tonight was cruel and disgraceful. You showed the world who you really are, and whatever respect you had in this room, it's gone. Camille's face crumbled. Her proud smile vanished. Her moment of power had ended. Just then, a voice cut through the tension. Wait! All heads turned. It was Henry Drake, the groom. He stepped forward, shoulders squared, his face serious. Camille whispered, barely audible, Henry? But Henry wasn't looking at her. His gaze was locked on Elise and Adrian. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. I have something to say, too. Camille's eyes widened. Henry kept walking until he was standing beside Adrian. His voice was clear. Elise and Adrian believed in me long before I was anyone. When I had nothing, no name, no money, they saw something in me. They supported me, guided me, and helped build the company I have today. The room was silent again. No one could deny what they were witnessing. "They gave me a chance," Henry said, "when no one else would." The room went utterly silent, stunned by Henry's words. All eyes flicked between him and Camille, the woman who had just moments ago basked in credit for his success. But now, in front of everyone, Henry had exposed the truth. He turned toward Elise, his voice softer now, full of genuine emotion. "I remember the nights Elise stayed up with me, helping me sketch out my first business plan when I had no clue what I was doing. She didn't ask for money, favors, or recognition. She just believed in me, and in my dreams." Then he turned back to Camille, and the warmth in his voice vanished. "But you, Camille, you're nothing like her. Today I saw who you really are. You're not just selfish, you're cruel, you're judgmental. You look down on others because you think wealth makes you better." He paused, the words landing like stones in the room's quiet air. "What you did to Elise wasn't just disappointing, it was disgusting. And I'm ashamed that I ever pictured a future with someone like you." Camille's legs trembled. Tears spilled down her cheeks as her perfect facade cracked. The mask she wore had shattered, and there was no hiding now. Beside her, Tori, Kendall, and Brianna stood frozen, pale, speechless, and hollow-eyed. The fun they'd enjoyed had twisted into something deeply ugly. Henry's eyes swept the ballroom, and then, clearly and boldly, he spoke the words that changed everything. "I'm calling off this wedding, right now, in front of all of you." A gasp rippled through the guests like a shock wave. "I refuse to spend my life with someone who doesn't know the meaning of dignity or respect, or what it means to truly care about people." Camille rushed forward, grabbing his arm, her voice breaking. "Henry, please don't do this. Don't let everything fall apart over something so small. We still have so much—" He shook her hand off firmly. "No, Camille, this isn't small. This is everything. And you don't get it, because you've never had real respect for anyone but yourself." She stumbled back, her pride shattered like glass. Around them, the once laughing crowd now stood in silent regret, shame creeping over their faces. No one spoke. No one dared. Adrian stepped forward and gently placed a hand on Henry's shoulder, a small gesture of solidarity. Henry turned to Adrian and Elise, bowing his head slightly. "I'm sorry for what happened today. Truly. Thank you both. Not just for your support, but for believing in me when no one else would." Elise gave a soft smile, steady and kind. "Tyler," she said gently, "you've got nothing to apologize for. What you did today proves you're exactly the man we always knew you were." In the stillness that followed, the three of them, Adrian, Elise, and Henry, stood side by side, a quiet wall of strength, truth, and human decency. They had faced cruelty, lies, and judgment, and they had risen above it. But Henry wasn't finished. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His voice when he spoke was colder now, sharper. "Let's make one thing absolutely clear." Camille's eyes widened. Her body froze. Henry held up his phone so that every guest could see the screen, and so the thousands watching online could see it too. His voice was calm but cutting. "Everything that happened to Elise tonight was planned." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. Guests shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting, minds racing. Henry continued, each word clear and deliberate. "Camille and her friends, Tori, Kendall, and Brianna, set this up from the beginning. They invited Elise not to reconnect, but to humiliate her." Gasps echoed now. He lifted the phone higher. On screen were screenshots, private group chats between the women. Henry read aloud, "Let's invite her, then make her the joke of the night." Another message appeared. "Can't wait to see what kind of thrift store disaster." She shows up in... His eyes returned to Camille, his voice lowering with controlled fury. And those are your words, Camille. The entire ballroom held its breath. And there's more, Henry said, lifting his phone once again. His voice was now cold and steady. Camille also suggested having Elise's gift searched by security, just to humiliate her even more. And why? Because she was the only black guest here tonight. A heavy silence crushed the room. This wasn't just cruel, he continued, his voice rising. It was downright racist. Camille's body shook. Her flawless makeup ran in thick, wet streaks down her cheeks. Desperate, she rushed forward and grabbed Henry's arm, her voice cracking with panic. Tyler, I made a mistake. Please, don't do this. We can talk in private. Just not like this. Not in front of everyone. But Henry didn't flinch. He pulled his arm away gently but firmly, his eyes no longer filled with love, only sorrow and disappointment. No, Camille. I loved you once. I trusted you. But tonight, you showed everyone exactly who you are. You didn't just betray me. You made me ashamed to have ever stood beside you. Camille staggered backward, her world falling apart in front of hundreds of watching eyes. She looked to Tori, Kendall, and Brianna, her usual circle of smug confidence. But none of them stepped forward. They stood frozen, faces pale, heads bowed. Jessica quietly ended her live stream, horrified by how far things had spiraled. Tori and Brianna held on to each other like frightened children, the truth finally crashing in. Camille tried again, her voice weak and trembling. Please, Henry, think about our future. We've worked so hard for this day. I can fix it. I swear I can fix it. Henry's answer was final. There is no future for us, Camille. Not after tonight. Not after what you did to Elise. The crowd began to murmur. Shocked guests whispered behind manicured hands. Phones came up again, snapping photos, filming, videos. The story had already begun to explode online. Within minutes, social media was flooded. Videos of the confrontation, screenshots of the messages, hashtags calling Camille out for racism and cruelty. Thousands of angry comments poured in, condemning her behavior and demanding accountability. Brand sponsors pulled out. Media headlines lit up. Influencer bride exposed at luxury wedding for racist humiliation of guest. The glamorous world Camille had spent years building crumbled around her in seconds. On stage, she stood frozen, eyes wide, mouth parted, unable to speak or move. She had become the very thing she tried to make Elise, a public disgrace. Meanwhile, Elise stood quietly with Adrian and Henry by her side. Their presence was calm, steady, and filled with quiet power. In the raw light of truth, justice had arrived. And it was clear to everyone now, those who build their lives on cruelty, lies, and hate would eventually face their own ruin. Just then, the room fell into a heavy silence. Adrian stepped forward. His expression was sharp, cold, and commanding as he swept his gaze across the ballroom. Guest after guest lowered their heads, unable to hold his stare. That look alone said what no words could. This wasn't over. Adrian raised his hand slightly, a silent signal. At once, a sharply dressed woman approached, tall, calm, efficient. It was Eliza, Adrian's personal assistant. He leaned down and spoke a few quick, firm words into her ear. Eliza nodded, stepped back, and pulled out her phone. Without hesitation, less than a minute later, she returned with a tablet in her hand. Her voice, cool and composed, cut through the silence. Mr. Blake, she said, I've contacted hotel security and your media team. They're reviewing surveillance footage and social media activity from tonight. Every person who mocked or insulted Miss Monroe is being identified. Adrian nodded slowly, his voice deep and full of purpose. Good. Make sure none of them are overlooked. Every single one. The Announcement landed like thunder. The room erupted in quiet panic. Guests exchanged frantic looks. People fumbled to close apps, delete videos, hide evidence of their involvement. But it was too late. Adrian had spoken, and everyone knew what that meant. Those who had laughed and thrown cruel words at Elise just moments earlier were now in a panic. Faces pale, hands shaking, they frantically tried to delete their hateful posts from their phones, but it was too late. Eliza, calm and focused, leaned toward Adrian and whispered a quiet update. He gave a small, firm nod. Then she turned to the security team with crisp authority in her voice. "Please proceed." 3 security officers, in sharp black suits, stepped forward. Their target, Camille's inner circle, Tori, Brianna, and Kendall. The color drained from their faces. Tori, who had gleefully streamed Elise's embarrassment to her followers, was the first. As the officers approached, she began to tremble. "Wait, please. I didn't mean it. It was just a joke," she stammered, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't take me out. I was only playing along." But no one listened. The officers gently took her by the arms and led her toward the exit. Her earlier smugness was gone. Now she looked terrified, small, ashamed, broken. Next was Brianna, the once confident beauty mogul. Her steps were slow, her voice cracked with emotion. Please don't do this. I'll apologize to Elise right now. I'll do anything, just let me make it right." Adrian's voice rang out, deep and cold, slicing through her plea. "Your apology means nothing. Your actions, and those of your friends, crossed every line of basic human decency. You must now face the consequences." Brianna lowered her head. Her luxurious gown now looked crushed and pitiful under the weight of her shame as she was escorted out of the room. Finally, Kendall was called. The woman who had dumped wine on Elise's dress, laughing like it was entertainment for the crowd, now stood shaking. She looked at Adrian, tears streaming. "Mr. Blake, I'm so sorry. Please, I'll do anything. Just give me one more chance to make things right." But Adrian's gaze didn't soften. "Do you even understand the pain you caused Elise? You did it all for a laugh, and now that the tables have turned, you want forgiveness?" He shook his head slowly. "It's far too late, Kendall." Head bowed, shoulders slumped, she followed the officers out of the ballroom without another word. All around them, the guests were silent. The cruelty they had once found so amusing had turned to horror. They had cheered it on, and now they watched as justice took its slow, powerful course. No one dared question Adrian. Not anymore. His decisions, his words, each one had carried the weight of truth. Then Adrian turned back to Elise, his face softened. His eyes held only warmth. He took her hand gently. "Elise," he said quietly, "I'm so sorry you had to go through this tonight. But I promise you, no one will ever hurt or humiliate you again." Elise looked up at him with a soft smile, one full of love, gratitude, and strength. The pain she'd carried all evening slowly began to melt away. In that grand, quiet ballroom, the two of them stood hand in hand, side by side, not as a billionaire and his wife, but as two people who had endured the worst and stood tall in their truth, with integrity, kindness, and unshakable love. As the final echoes of laughter and cruelty faded, a calm settled over the room. The air felt clearer, lighter, real. Adrian gently squeezed Elise's hand and looked into her eyes. "I think," he said with a warm smile, "it's time you re-enter this room as the woman you truly are." Elise smiled back. Her strength returned. She stood tall. With that, Adrian gave a subtle nod to Eliza. Eliza stepped forward swiftly and respectfully addressed her. "Mrs. Blake, we've prepared a private room for you to change." With grace in every step, Elise followed Eliza through the quieted ballroom toward the private suite. The same guests who had once whispered behind her back now watched with wide eyes and hushed reverence. No one dared look down on her. Instead, their gazes held awe. For the first time, they truly saw Elise for who she was. Minutes later, the double doors swung open again. Elise re-entered the ballroom, no longer the woman they had mocked, but a vision of poise and quiet power. Gone was the simple linen dress. In its place was a flowing silk gown, soft and white, that shimmered gently under the chandeliers. Her hair, loose and gleaming, framed her face like a crown. And her eyes sparkled with calm confidence. The room fell still, not a whisper, not a rustle, just silence and admiration. As she passed through the crowd, guests instinctively rose to their feet. Some bowed, others placed hands over their hearts in silent apology. Elise didn't need their approval, but their gesture mattered. It was respect. It was remorse. Adrian stepped beside her, his arm wrapping gently around her shoulders. Together they walked toward the center of the room like royalty. No, like something even greater. Symbols of grace, justice, and truth. Tyler, the groom, stepped forward quietly. He looked humbled, his voice soft but strong as he approached them both. "Elise, I want to say how truly sorry I am," he began, emotion tightening his words. "I should have seen through what was happening. I was blind, and I let others hurt you. I can't undo it, but I want you to know I regret every moment." Elise reached out, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "You don't owe me sorrow, Tyler," she said warmly. "You didn't plan this, and in the end, you stood up for what was right. That speaks more about your heart than anything that came before." Her voice was calm, forgiving, steady. Henry looked down, visibly moved. "Thank you," he whispered. "Your strength, it's changed something in me. I promise I'll carry that forward." Adrian smiled approvingly and stepped forward to speak. "Tyler," he said with kindness, "we've always believed in your potential. I know you'll become the kind of man this world needs, honest, brave, and just." Henry nodded, his shoulders lighter, and stepped back. Around them, the crowd slowly began to move, not with arrogance or flash, but with humility. Guests came forward one by one, some with apologies, others just to offer quiet respect. The same people who had mocked Elise now looked at her as someone they hoped to learn from. Adrian leaned closer to her and whispered softly, "See, Elise, the light of kindness and dignity always wins in the end, and you, my love, are the brightest light in this room." Tears shimmered in Elise's eyes, but they were no longer from pain. They were from gratitude, fulfillment, pride. She had come to this place as a woman unsure of her place. Now she stood as a woman who had reclaimed it, completely. The night shifted. Warmth bloomed. Laughter returned, softer this time, real. Guests who had come for glitz and gossip were leaving with something deeper. Lessons learned in humility, strength, and grace. No one spoke of Camille anymore, or Tori, or the cruel spectacle they'd tried to orchestrate. That part of the evening had vanished like shadows swallowed by morning light. As the music began again and lights sparkled above, Adrian walked to the podium. The crowd quieted once more. His voice was steady and rich with meaning. "Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of love," he said, "and it still is. But love doesn't only show up in flowers or gowns or candlelight. It shows up in who we choose to be when others are watching, and when they're not. It shows up in how we treat one another, how we defend what's right, and most importantly, how we forgive." He looked at Elise with a proud smile. "Tonight," he said, We witnessed not just a party, but a truth. The kind that stays with you long after the music stops. Adrian paused, his gaze sweeping gently across the room. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, but full of meaning. "What happened tonight is a reminder of something we too often forget," he said. "A person's true worth is never found in their wealth, their status, or their appearance. It lives in their kindness, their honesty, their strength to do what's right, even when it's hard." The ballroom fell completely silent. No one moved. No one blinked. His words sank deep. Those who had mocked Elise earlier now felt the weight of their own shame. They had judged someone without truly seeing her, and now they knew just how wrong they'd been. Adrian turned to Elise, who stood beside him, calm and strong. His eyes softened. "Elise isn't just my wife," he said. "She is the soul of everything I've built. She is the reason I stand here today. Her kindness, her quiet strength, her courage. These are the things that truly matter." Elise's eyes shimmered, but she held her head high. Adrian looked back at the guests, his tone steady and heartfelt. "From this moment forward, I hope we all remember what tonight has taught us, that it's time to rise above prejudice, cruelty, and shallow judgments. Only then can we truly call ourselves human." As Adrian finished, the entire room stood. They clapped, not out of habit, not out of politeness, but from the heart. It was applause filled with emotion, with realization, with respect. Business leaders, celebrities, influential figures, all of them turned to Elise, not with pity or guilt, but admiration. They had seen her fall and rise, and now they understood her true strength. Even Henry stood at the back, his head bowed. He wasn't just thinking about the woman he almost married. He was thinking about the man he now wanted to become. The wedding, once planned as a glamorous display of wealth, had transformed into something deeper. It had become a tribute to real values, compassion, dignity, and truth. Elise stepped forward. Beside Adrian, hand in hand, she looked out at the guests, her voice soft but unwavering. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for listening, for seeing, for remembering what truly matters. I hope that after tonight, we all choose to look at people not by what they wear or where they come from, but by who they are." The room was quiet again, but it wasn't the silence of shame anymore. It was the quiet of hearts opening. Under the soft sparkle of the chandeliers, Elise and Adrian no longer stood as just a power couple. They stood as symbols of something far greater: kindness, change, and the strength it takes to be good in a world that so often forgets how. Guests began to leave in quiet thought. Some wiped away tears, others held their partners' hands a little tighter. No one would leave that ballroom the same. And as Adrian and Elise stood near the grand doors, watching the last guests step out into the warm Miami night, Elise felt peace. Not just because she had been defended, but because she had been truly seen. She knew that from this night forward, she would be remembered not for her name, her status, or even her wealth, but for the light she had carried in the darkest moment. And in that light, a new chapter had begun, a story not just of personal victory, but of hope for a better, kinder world. True strength doesn't wear diamonds or designer labels. It walks with quiet dignity, forgives when it's hardest, and stands tall in the face of cruelty. Elise's journey reminds us that kindness, respect, and integrity will always shine, brighter than status or wealth. If this tale touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder. Your worth isn't defined by how the world sees you. It's defined by how you treat others,